because that's what we believe you need when there's a complex issue. You need all those stakeholders involved. You need all those people with different perspectives. We try to bring those people together by facilitating dialogue processes and also by conducting narrative research, for example. And for this, we use a methodology and an online tool, which is called Sprockler. And basically, that's what we will talk about in this session, about the methodology and tool Sprockler. I will share my screen so I can just show you the program that we designed for this session. Let me check where it is. So this is the program for this afternoon. For this short Sprockler taster session, we have the welcome and introduction. We will do a short check-in after this, and then we will do a quick introduction to Sprockler. But it will be just short because we want you to kind of experience Sprockler and experiment a bit with it instead of me telling how it works. So we will experience and practice with Sprockler. Then we will briefly reflect on this and discuss how it was for you. Then I will introduce, most probably not really a case study, but I will give you a few examples of how we've been using Sprockler and how it looks like. And then there will be definitely some room for questions and answers and discussion. And then at 4, we will close the session. So before we dive into Sprockler, we believe it's good to do a short check-in, but we're with quite many people, so we will do this in breakout rooms. So we will create the breakout rooms in a minute. You will be there with 3-4 people, I guess, just as a way to get to know each other a little bit before we dive into Sprockler. So we will ask you 2 questions for the checkout. You can discuss with the others in your small group. Of course, you will briefly introduce yourself. I'm pretty sure you will do that. But then we have 2 questions. Why are you here today? So what made you decide to sign up for this session? And is there one thing you're looking forward to in this session? So those 2 questions, I think Chiwa will make the breakout rooms. You only have 3 minutes, no, 6 minutes in total for the checkout, just check in. So if you're with 3 people, it's like 2 minutes each. 6 minutes, we will make sure then at the end we will broadcast the message and you'll come back to the panel. Is it okay for everyone?
Sure, I think so.
Okay. Then we'll see you in about 6 minutes. Yes, everyone's back. Just very briefly, because we do not have the time, of course, to ask all of you individually, but maybe we can share a little bit of feedback about the reasons why you are here. If there's someone who wants to share just in half a sentence why you're here, you can also type it in the chat if you'd like, just for us to get an idea of the reasons why you signed up for this taster. Feel free to speak up or type.
Well, maybe I can just go ahead, and you just mentioned me and Adrian. I was just giving a big shout out to Perspectivity, mentioning that I've been following your work for a while, and I was very delighted to see that Si Amsterdam actually connected with you guys, and you're doing this. So this is, at least for me, why I am here.
Thank you, Sebastian. That's very kind. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm a member of the SI Food Hub, one of the core members. And so also jumping on to see what my good friend Hannah is putting on together and cooking up. So here to learn and support and meet other geniuses as well in the space. So good evening, guys, or morning or night, depending where you are.
Thank you, Adrian. So Tommy says, being curious, trying to expand my knowledge about system thinking. It will not be in particular about system thinking, but definitely this is a tool you can use in the context of system thinking. But that may be another discussion, but for now, that's perfectly fine. Is there someone else who wants to share something, or is it okay for now? Perfect. How can stories be captured, shared, and used? Yes, Cynefin. Great. We'll talk a very bit about Cynefin. Yes. All right. So let's talk about Sprockler. Let's talk about storytelling. Yes. Storytelling in systems context. Yes. And complexity. Yes, I think you're in the right session. Great. I'll share my screen and I will tell the story of Sprockler. Oh, this is the wrong one, this one. So Sprockler is basically a methodology and an online tool for participatory narrative inquiry, meaning it's story-based, that's the narrative part, and it's participatory in the sense that, we'll explain it later, in the sense that people who share their story will also be involved actively in making sense of the stories. So it's story-based participatory research. It's a methodology a few colleagues of us developed, I guess, some 10 years ago, based on the work some others have done before. I mean, it's not brand new, but it's just a kind of a new invention based on everything which has been developed before. And basically, it's a methodology and an online tool, an online platform for using stories, real stories of real people in real life, to make sense of a complex issue. So it's complex sensitive. And Sprockler enables us to collect a large amount of stories. So it's not only one story or 10 stories, but you can collect hundreds of stories in this tool. And so it's not only about collecting stories, but it's also about discerning patterns in those stories. So basically what we say quite often, it's a kind of a unique combination of qualitative and quantitative inquiries. It's the best of both worlds, what we sometimes say. So you have like the data, you have the objectivity of the data, the overview of the data. Basically, that's the what happens. And then there's the stories, which has all the richness and the nuance and the power of storytelling, which tells us a bit more about the why. So it's an online platform. It's complex sensitive, it's participatory, and it's a really nice tool also for adaptive learning. Cynefin, I think I already saw it in the chat, someone mentioning Cynefin. I'm pretty sure some of you will be familiar with this framework. It's by Dave Snowden. And for us, well, the difference between complex and complicated is quite relevant here. Because we as Perspectivity and also with this tool, Sprockler, we work a lot in this complex domain, the complex field. And basically for me, what really helped me a lot when I came across Cynefin some years ago, this difference between complicated and complex. Complex meaning there's a lot of actors involved, a lot of factors involved. It's an issue which is highly unpredictable. It's very volatile. You don't know the effects beforehand. So if you do an intervention or a program or you design a policy, you don't know beforehand what the effects will be. Only in hindsight, you can sometimes see like, these are the patterns and this is why something happened, but you don't know beforehand. And there's a high level of interdependence. I mean, you all know, of course, it's very ambiguous. So that's very different from issues in the complicated domain or in the obvious domain. Which means basically that if you want to understand what is happening in the complex domain around a complex issue, what is emerging maybe, you cannot use blueprints. The assumptions you might have, they may not hold. You don't know if it's true. So how can you make sense of what's happening in the complex field? What is emerging? All those actors and factors involved, all those perspectives, what is emerging, what is happening, and why are things happening? For this, you need all those perspectives, you need all those stakeholders involved, all those people involved. You need, and that's what we believe, then if you want to get more insight into what's happening in this complex domain, you need actual experiences from people in real life. And that's where we came up with Sprockler as a tool for story-based research. Sprockler is based basically on 4 design principles, and I will just briefly go through them because I think it helps to understand what the Sprockler methodology is about and why it is built like it is built. And then we will just practice a bit so you can experience how Sprockler works. Storytelling is the first design principle. So it's really about the stories of people, and the storyteller. It's key in Sprockler. The second principle is the self-signification, and this is the participatory approach we have in Sprockler, because we believe that if people tell a story, people themselves can tell best what they meant with their story. What is the story about? What's the key elements of the story? So we ask people not only to share a story, but we also ask people to reflect on their own story and make sense of their own story, to give meaning to their own story. So that's the self-signification part. The third part is the collective sense-making. This is also the participatory approach. So when we've collected all those stories, maybe 20 or 50 or 100 or 200 stories, we ask this group of storytellers, if it's possible, to collectively make sense of this collection of stories. What is the story of stories? So it's not only us as facilitators who will analyze the stories, but we facilitate the group of storytellers to collectively make sense of what they together shared, their stories and their reflections on their own stories. And then the last principle, it's about sharing insights, that we believe that if you ask someone to tell a story and also ask someone to reflect on their own story, you should give something back. So all the results from the stories, results from the sense making, we visualize in like an online report, and we give it back so we can make sense, and we can together see what do we see in those results, what insights do we get from it, and how can we move on. So it's really a principle that we believe that you should also give back to the storytellers the results of the inquiry. So this is very in brief the design principles. I think we can just briefly go through the process, and I think then it's really we should practice a bit and experience a bit how Sprockler works. So this is the process. 5 steps basically. First, sense the urgency. So discover what you really need to know. What's the question you want to ask the people? It makes sense, but at the same time, we see that sometimes this step is, some people tend to forget this step. So what do you really need to know? Then there is the Sprockler designer. Sprockler consists of 3 modules you will use. So it's the designer, the collector, and the visualizer. In step 2, you use the Sprockler designer module, where you design the inquiry and you test it. Then the next step is the collector. So you reach out to respondents and you collect their stories and their reflections on their own stories. And you can do this in multiple ways. And we can talk about this later, how you can collect the stories. You can do it online, you can do it face-to-face, peer-to-peer. We can discuss this later. Then there's the visualizer, and that's the module which you use to visualize the results, which enables us to collectively make sense of it. We'll show you later. I guess this may be a bit abstract now, a bit vague, but we'll show you later. And then the last step is telling the story of stories. So what's the story of all those stories collected? And then share the information with the stakeholders, with the storytellers, all the people involved. Okay, I think now it's just time to experiment a bit with the Sprockler and see for yourself how it works. And we will do this again in breakout groups. I will stop sharing my screen because now we do not need this. What we will do is we will create breakout rooms, and you will be in the breakout rooms in pairs. And we've designed a short Sprockler inquiry, which you can use yourself, so you can experience how it works. It's what we call the weather inquiry. So we'll ask you, it's not very complex, but we'll ask you stories about the weather. So you will go in the breakout rooms. First, do not use the online inquiry yet, just share a story about the weather. Share a story, something you experienced yourself, maybe last year, maybe 10 years ago, it doesn't really matter. Share a story in which the weather played a very important role. Just share it, and then the other person will also share a story. That's about 10 minutes. Then the second step is that you fill in the inquiry together. So we will put a link in the chat, which you can use. There you can, first of all, the first question will be, can you share a story? Well, that's the story you just shared. So you can just type the story of the other person. So you're kind of an interviewer. So you type the story of the other person, and then you will go through the inquiry question by question. I think it's quite easy to follow. Just see how it works. And let's say we take in total 20 minutes to fill in the inquiry together, so 10 minutes each. That's a lot of information. Does it make sense, or is it a bit complicated the way I try to explain it?
Do we fill out the information at this, like simultaneously, we both do it, or are we talking ourselves through each person filling it out, like one after another?
One after another, yeah. So first, like the first 10 minutes, just take the first 10 minutes to share a story, both of you, together, without filling in the inquiry. It's just about the storytelling. After 10 minutes, let's say one of the two just opens the inquiry. Maybe you can share your screen. And then the second person can just briefly tell again the story, and the interviewer will type it. Doesn't need to be very long, it's up to you. Just type it in short about the story. And then the interviewer person clicks on the next question. And then the second person will answer the questions, and the interviewer will answer the question in the inquiry. So you take about 10 minutes to fill in the inquiry, and then you switch roles. And then the second person will be the interviewer for the other person. I hope you had a nice storytelling, story sharing. In the breakouts, I could see that quite a lot of stories and answers were now in the Sprockler system, so that looks very nice. Just very briefly checking whether it worked for everyone. How was it? Just very brief, but I'm just curious. Did it work for you? Did you understand what you had to do? I mean, how was it to share a story about the weather, and then to answer questions about your story about the weather? Just if someone wants to share something, either via the chat or speak up, please. Yeah, fun. That's nice.
It was really good. It was really good.
Okay, great. Fred, yeah.
So didn't know that it could be so fun to talk about the weather. But that said, and thank you for connecting me to Adrian. The one thing that I found difficult was the way we interpreted your instructions, and maybe we did it wrong, but we told each other one story each, and then we picked one, and Adrian was sharing and I was asking questions, and we filled it this way. So I found that it must be very difficult in the design to pick the right questions when the topic is relatively large. And so I would be interested in the rest of the conversation if you could share about how do you design the questions to be at the same time relevant for the largest group, but meaningful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Fred. Thank you. And I think we will come back to it later a little bit, because we have very limited time, of course, in this taster. But this is actually exactly the balance we're trying to find every time we design an inquiry, because on the one hand, we're really looking for open questions, because we're looking also for all the things we don't know. Actually, I mean, we're talking about complex issues, so there's a lot of things we do not know. So we're also looking for the unintended, the things we're not expecting. So that's why we always start with this story question, which is very open, because we're really curious to hear what people actually think or feel or experience, instead of me thinking, I think this is what I'm curious about, so please tell me this. No, please tell me what you want to tell me. Everything you tell me is valuable. It's okay. At the same time, doing an inquiry like this has a purpose, of course. So we're looking for some information. So that's why we have to steer a bit towards the information we're looking for. So I don't have like an answer, I guess, on how to do it, but this is exactly what's the point. That's why we always say when we do Sprockler inquiries, really pay attention to this first phase, the design phase. What are you looking for? And then try to design together with some people from the stakeholder groups. So do not do it on your own, but invite some people, and together collectively try to think about what are we looking for, what are the things we do not know, and how can we design the right questions so we get the information we're looking for, but we'll also collect the information we were not looking for, or maybe we were not thinking we're looking for. I'm not sure if that's the answer to your question, but it's exactly what's part of the process. Yeah.
It's great, and I realized you don't have a lot of time, so I'll just put the pointer, but you do not need to respond to that. We can do it after the fact, or if it's relevant for other people. But I saw the triangles that were meaningful. It reminded me a bit SenseMaker. What I didn't see was I didn't see the notion of tags or whatever people would send as a blah kind of thing to see if there is like a word count or something like like a word cloud or something like that. And I was wondering whether you have found ways to make apparent what is emerging while at the same time avoid the early response bias. And that's it. And you don't need to answer now if it's relevant, if it echoes other people. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah. I think we should find some time later maybe to discuss this, because this is actually what it's about. Yeah. And you were mentioning SenseMaker, and that's exactly what Sprockler has been building on. Yeah. So I can relate to that. Yeah. So I saw two other hands. Yeah, let's just Jean and Adeline. Yes.
So working with an organization, do you craft the question for them to tell a story about that they collectively think that they have the same problem, or do you ask them to develop a story about what they think the problem is? Because I mean, in some organizations, you'll have the whole organization have a common sense of what the problem is, and then you have those situations where nobody agrees on anything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question as well. It depends. I would say it depends on the purpose of the Sprockler inquiry. Basically, Sprockler is applied in two different ways. Well, in a bit more, but let's say two different ways. One is for monitoring and evaluation. So it's really looking back. If you run a program, done an intervention, you really want to know what are the effects, also the unintended effects. Then most of the times we're looking for factual information, really looking for information, the things people experience, people really know that this has changed. This is what has happened in my life. The second way how to use Sprockler is to collect people's perceptions, people's views, people's opinions, people's concerns, people's ideas, wishes, dreams, perhaps, about the future, which then could be the input for new strategies, new policies. We work a lot with governments, local governments, regional governments, and this is a tool to collect on a large scale, collect from citizens what they are thinking about. And this could be really about dreams, about things they do not know, but they are wishing for. And then we designed an inquiry, we designed a question as based on this. So that's totally different things actually we're asking for. So I would say it really depends on, again, on the first phase, what is it what you're looking for, and what kind of questions then do we need to ask? I hope that helps a bit, yeah? Let's do one more question, and then I will show you a report, because I think we're pretty curious to see what your stories were. But yes, please, Adeline.
Yeah, for me, how you collect the info, is it mainly digital, or do you conduct the interviews face-to-face, or like at least asking the question? Because there is always like this risk of induction, or this risk of they don't really understand the question. So how do you manage that? Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, we do it in multiple ways. You can do it online. Like actually now we sent you the link. But then you were in pairs, so you could even share the story to the other. So now we had a bit of combination of doing interviews and using an online link. We do it face-to-face with interviewers. We do it in group sessions sometimes. So we have a group of people who share stories amongst themselves, and then individually they fill in the inquiry. It totally depends, again, also on the purpose, but also on the context of the project. I would say my personal experience is that sending a link to a large group of people, that's not the best way to do it. It's an easy way to reach out to many people, and you might be able then to collect a large amount of stories, but at the same time we see that the amount of response is very low when people just receive a link in their mailbox. So it's way better to collect stories face to face, because it's about stories, and it's of course much easier to tell a story to a person who's sitting next to you instead of typing a story on your laptop. That's not really storytelling, of course. But there's multiple ways. There's also an app which we use, so you can just walk by many people and just use the app to collect their stories. You can use also the audio, so you can record when they're telling stories. So there's multiple ways, in short. Okay, I'll share the report because you filled in the questionnaire and many people before you also did. So it's not only you and your stories who are in this report, but there are many more. So I just put the link so you can also already have a look yourself. I will also share my screen so we can go through the reports together. Because I'm curious to hear what you see in the report. This is just to give you an idea of how it looks like. And I will not go into detail because we do not have the time for that, but I will just briefly tell you how it works, the report, so it makes sense to you. I hope you can see my screen. Basically, you can see a lot of dots. Each and every dot is a story and is a storyteller. So I believe now in this inquiry, we have over 120 stories. So over 120 people shared a story about the weather. And if you click on the dots, then you can read the story of this particular person on the left side of the screen. So this is a story from a person saying, I arrived in Nairobi from Turkana County. Well, there's a story. Maybe, I'm not sure if you can see it, but if you click on the dot becomes a little bit bigger, which means that you can kind of see the dot in every graph. Like with this one, if you go down, so you can kind of follow this person through the inquiry. It's here, and it's here. Again, if you click on the dot, then the story disappears. You can click on another dot and read the story. As you've seen in the inquiry, we always start with the story question, so that's the open question. Then we have a set of what we call meaning mapping questions or interpretation questions, which is about reflecting on your own story. And we use a lot of the bipoles and the tripoles. You've seen that in the inquiry, which enables us to visualize all the answers to these questions. For example, how do you feel in the story you just shared? How did you feel about the weather? Was it strongly positive, strongly negative, and everything in between? And what we do when we use those bipoles is that we are really looking for the two extremes, because when we use the extremes, there's a lot of space between the extremes. So there's a lot of space for the nuance and for the richness which is in the stories. And when we visualize all the dots on the bipoles, for example, it enables us to see patterns in the answers which were given. One more thing, and then let's just reflect on what we see. In the inquiry, there were also some we call classification questions. It's questions about the storytellers. For example, about gender, about location. These questions enable us to kind of put a filter on the graphs. So for example, in this tripole, which is about how was the weather in your story? Was it sunny? Was it cloudy? Was it rainy? You can see all the answers here. And then we might think that perhaps the stories which took place in Europe, they are a bit more cloudy and rainy. That might be an assumption. So then if we click on the right side, there's this legend. If you click on pink dot Europe, then only the pink dots appear in the tripole, in the triangle. And you can see it's not only rainy, cloudy, but it's surprisingly sunny. So with this, you can play it. You can see like, I'm expecting that this group of people might provide other answers than another group of people. So you can just play with it and see what kind of patterns emerge based on the different groups of stakeholders or groups of people you've been asking. Okay, I think that's enough for the explanation, but I cannot see you now, but I'm just curious to hear from you what you see if you scroll through the report. If you see the graphs, if you see the dots, do you see any patterns? Is there something which is remarkable? Is there something surprising for you? Just a bit of reflection in the group. What do you see when you scroll through the report? Feel free to speak up if you want to say something.
I find very interesting that the report is so visual, because like you have an image and a few dots on it. I think it helps your brain to look at things differently than if you just had numbers.
Yeah, that's also our experience. Yeah. And
So
to mention, we also do this, for example, with kids. So we ask children to tell a story and to answer the questions, and then the visual part is very relevant, because also for kids this is very easy. I mean, everyone can see patterns in these clouds of dots.
Since this is we have people globally right here, so that's why the distribution is so scattered. In the sense, maybe for weather, if it is a local questions, locally you're asking questions, then maybe they will be more. We'll get more answers towards specific answers rather than distributed answers. Like, for example, when I was sharing my story, here I am feeling too hot because of the heat wave that is going. And the person I was talking to is in Europe, right? So he's feeling cold. So here we get to know that the distribution is there. Of course, over a period of time to understand how climate change is impacting world over, this might make sense over a period of time. But do you feel that asking questions at a global level and taking stories will make sense in such kind of things? Because the analytics becomes difficult, right? As we can see now, it is too scattered. Every question is scattered, so we have very different answers.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Yeah, that's why the classification questions and the legend on the right side, so the filters, they help a lot. So for example, we use Sprockler a lot for evaluating programs in the development sector, and then especially programs which were developed and were implemented in different parts of the world, different regions. So then this really helps us to see how the program turns out, what are the results of the program, the effects in different parts of the world. And then the filter really helps a lot, that you can see that in a certain area in the world, the effect might be very different from the same program in another area.
Yeah.
And that's something we're looking for. That's the information we're looking for, how a certain program has different effects based on different circumstances.
Yeah.
And then for sure, it depends on how you set the filters. Now, in this example, we set Central Asia, North America, which are, of course, large regions.
Right.
In like real inquiries, we are looking for some more specific regions. We really focusing on certain areas, but it depends, of course, on the purpose. And this is all tailor-made, so you can decide yourself how you want to create the filters.
So just to add on to your answer, so we have certain intervention, right? And we want to evaluate it. So we evaluate the intervention, right? So this helps us in evaluation, but the intervention should also have the scope for change, because sometimes the change is itself expensive. So evaluating, because I had done evaluation in the past, so evaluation itself is doesn't help the organization because they don't take any action, even if we evaluate and we come to certain conclusions based on the evaluation. So that's my experience, at least in India. I don't know how it works, but yeah.
Okay, but what do you mean exactly? Can you elaborate a little bit?
So you use this tool for evaluation,
Yeah.
to evaluate an intervention, right?
Mm-hmm.
So evaluation only makes sense when we are ready for change, right? If the organization is ready for change, then only the evaluation makes sense, whether certain intervention has benefited or not. If it has not, then the organization should be ready to bring the change so that future interventions are beneficial.
Yeah.
So I mean, this report will be useful when the organizations are ready for the change, looking at the evaluation. That's my only point. Yeah.
Yeah. No, sorry. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, and that's what also the difference we see when it's about why do you want to evaluate, what are you looking for, and this is really a tool, as I think it was in the presentation before. It's really a tool also for adaptive learning. So it's really about learning what are the effects of your intervention, and if that's the purpose of doing an evaluation, this really helps. But I must say we have conversations like this also with clients and with organizations. Are you ready for change? Are you looking for the change? How do you want to use it? Yeah. So there's also more questions. Yes, please, Clara.
Yeah, so I had a question which is more around, so we were just musing on the fact that we both had snowy weather stories. And then we, what is your point of view around sort of what is on the menu of options when you are looking into these other questions, and do you envision that, for instance, maybe it makes sense or doesn't to add this opportunity that you kind of add things to that menu and then see if others subscribe to them, or how would that look like? I'm specifically talking about the rainy season is important because.
Yes. Yes. I think the short answer is that every question here in the inquiry is, as I said before, is tailor-made. So in every question, you could decide yourself, like, what are the options, the answers we want to give. And it's always finding a balance between giving like a certain amount of options, because that enables us to see some patterns in the answers that were given, and open questions to get all the information we want. But if it's too many open questions, then it's really difficult to see the patterns. That's one thing. And the second thing is that we always say also when people start using Sprockler, to pay attention to this design phase and do test the inquiry with the people who will participate. And my experience is that in most of the cases, some organizations tend to really, just forget this part, because they design an inquiry and there we go. But it's really important to test the inquiry, because then you will see how people react to the questions. Maybe some options that were not there. Maybe you should add a question. So this first phase, designing the inquiry and then testing it before you reach out to people, that's essential. That's really key. Yeah. I think there's some more questions. I couldn't see who was first, but just maybe Lynn. We haven't heard you, I think, before.
I could, although I think Fred's hand was first. All right, well, maybe a quick, so one was just a question about the 20-degree temperature. I'm just not sure how to read that graph. Is that picture supposed to tell us something with the big dots? Like, I think there's a big red one. Is that there's more responses from that part of the world, East Asia? I think it's at the bottom.
Yeah, I will check. I'll scroll down. Yeah, this one, the 21.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very easy. It doesn't really say it. It's just this one with the dots. That's just a picture.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really mean anything.
Okay. It's just
besides
giving us
being a
that total.
picture. Yeah.
It's a lovely picture. Okay, no interpretation. Okay. And then
But
I know time is
good
tight
question.
and maybe you want to get to Fred's question first, but I'd love to hear some examples. So it's interesting to look at this from the
Yes.
weather story, but kind of some real kinds of questions that you've used to solve what kind of issue.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
beautiful. Thank
that
you
was
for all
part
this.
of the program. Thank you. Yeah.
Great.
I think we go to Fred maybe very quickly, and then we go to some examples, because that makes sense to see some examples. Yes.
Thank you. And maybe actually examples will help answer some of the questions I had. I feel that questions like average degree central heating in home seems like the beginning of a chapter, but there's more to it, right? Like, for instance, right now we have a crisis of cost of energy. People may have 17 in their room, but they don't feel very happy about it. So I'm wondering whether your preference for face-to-face may actually be related to the fact that it's easier to do branching when you are face-to-face. So for instance, you can actually collect this side information, or you can go onto a path that, for instance, if you have 26 or 21, you want to know, is it intentional, is it not, etc. So that was one thing. Another thing is, one of the person before from India indicated that they may have an experience of the temperatures that are different. And so I was wondering, again, in the same line as branching, how can you break down a study to actually make it relevant, and then create a little bit like Dave Snowden says, relevant groups that have an information set that is coherent, or a message that is coherent, and then you confront the different groups to bring this, where do we go from here? That's it. I don't know if it was a well-formulated set of questions, but that's it. I'll stop now.
Perfect. Yeah, very interesting questions, and I'm really thinking about how can we do this when we use the methodology and the Sprockler tool. I think I'm not sure if it's a direct answer to your last question, but what we sometimes do in Sprockler is that we have an inquiry. We have one fixed inquiry for the whole group of respondents, of participants, and then for certain smaller groups we have different kind of sub-inquiries. And then you can come back to one inquiry again. That's kind of technically that's possible. And sometimes we do this, so we can really design the inquiries a bit more towards this subgroup of respondents. At the same time, of course, we're really trying to make one inquiry for all the respondents in the project, because it enables us to collect all their stories and we can see the patterns. But sometimes it is useful to see if you can start with one inquiry and then kind of make a bit smaller inquiries for certain subgroups. This happens, and this is possible. And this is, again, this is tailor-made based on what's the purpose and what's the group of respondents you're working with. And then maybe the first question you were posing, yes, I mean, this is actually why Sprockler was built, because we believe that there's so much behind the numbers. For example, if you have the number of certain degrees, 26 degrees, what does it say? Why do people choose for this number? What do the data tell us? That's why we have the stories. That's why when you click on a dot, you can read the story to get all the rich information which is behind the numbers and the data. And yes, my experience is that face-to-face is way better, because then people will start telling, and people will give many more information when they tell a story than when people just type their story into their computers. So what we do when we send the link, for example, to the Sprockler inquiry, we really invite people, like, please tell your story. And not only about what happened, but also who was there, where were you, what was the circumstance? Please bring all the details of your story, because this is the rich information we're looking for. But again, I mean, we can type it in the inquiry, we can fill it in, but we're not sure if people will do it. Whereas when I'm going to you, Fred, and I'm asking you a story, and I can just, of course, I can encourage you, like, oh, tell me a bit more about this. Why did you do this, or why did you not do this? So that really helps us to collect all the rich information we're looking for. So that's why most of the times we prefer to work with kind of interviewers, enumerators, who will guide people through the inquiry and really encourage people to tell everything they want to tell. And we always say everything is valuable. Even though you think it's not valuable, please share it because it might be valuable. Okay, I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll just show you kind of a real example, although this is also real, but in another way. I have two, but I will share this one first. Let me check. So it's this one. Actually, the original one is in Spanish, but my Spanish is not very good. So I used just to Google Translate to have it in English. This is an evaluation, just for your information. This is from an international NGO working on water initiatives, and they have been running a program in 4 countries, Colombia, Mexico, Nicaragua, and Paraguay, I remember. And they wanted to assess the effects of the program in the local communities in those 4 countries. So in total, they had 177 respondents sharing the stories and then answering all the questions. And I will just scroll down so you can see how it looks like. 177, here it says. So again, if you click on a dot, then you will get the story. And in this case, there were interviewers going to these local communities and really asking people to their stories. They use the app, which means you can record the audio, which is very nice because then you really hear people tell their stories. And I mean, it's all about stories. It's about human beings. And sometimes we tend to forget because it's a report with dots and graphs, but it's really like human beings sharing their stories. So there were many questions asked. And what I remember also from this project, from the colleagues who were working on this, is that there were also the organization who was doing this Sprockler project. They were quite happy because of a few questions which really gave them some insights. For example, there was a question about, I think it's here, just scroll a bit. People were asked about stories and then how did participants feel in the stories. Well, many participants said they were feeling quite happy, quite motivated, quite engaged. And in this particular case, people were also asked about changes. So what has changed because of the intervention, because of the program which was running in their community? And for example, here they were asked the changes they were describing in their story, according to the interviews, according to the respondents. The changes had happened in themselves or in their households or in their communities, which was very important for this organization. And the organization was quite happy to see that there were many dots like in the middle. So the change was in the people themselves and also in their households and in their communities. And also many dots in this corner and in this corner. And the respondents were also asked, for example, if they believe that this particular change, if it would last for, well, it would not last actually, or it would last for years. And people really felt, people themselves, and this is the participatory approach, this is self-signification. So people were asked themselves, but which change do you feel? And what do you think about these changes? And for the organization, this gave quite some insight in the effects of their program and how they could adjust their program, the next program. And then again, what is interesting, well, what's the key in Sprockler is if you want to know, for example, many people said that they think the changes will last for years. Of course, then I would be curious to know why. Why do people think this? And then you can just click on the dot and you can read the story or listen to the story in this case. And as we always tend to say, also the outlines are very important. So there's a few people who think that the changes will not last that long. Okay, let's see why. What do those people think? What did they experience and why do they think that these particular changes will not last long? So you can click on, for example, this yellow dot, it's very small. And you can listen to the story or read the story. Here you can see this just to get an idea of how it looks like. So this is an interviewer coming to all the communities, asking people to share a story, and with the tablet you can just record the stories, and together they can fill in the questionnaire, the inquiry. There is another example I can show you. Let me just briefly do that, and because I still want to have some time left for all the questions you might have. I'll show you one more example. Just this one. This was originally, this is in Dutch, but now it's in English. This is another way of applying Sprockler. So the previous one was for monitoring and evaluation purposes. This is from a regional government in the Netherlands. They had to draft a new strategy for the energy transition in this part of the Netherlands, in the province of Drenthe. And they wanted to ask all the citizens in the province to share their stories, share their concerns, share their ideas and their wishes about about solar and wind energy, basically. So the regional government used this as input for their regional strategy for the coming years. I believe here about 350 people participated in this inquiry. And there's also, now we have the opportunity to have this map. So this is the province of Drenthe, and you can see where all the people are living. Again, click on the dot, you can read the story. And what in this particular case was quite interesting is that two different questions were, many questions were asked, and this is just a short version of the report. But one question which was asked is, how important do you think is the use of other forms of energy? Well, if you can have a look at the BIPOL, it says it's absolutely not important. Well, it's very, very important. Well, a majority of the people, a large group of people says it's really important. And you can see a pattern on the right side. So people tend to believe it's quite important. Then the question was asked, and you all recognize this for sure. What do you feel? What do you think if there's like solar wind energy in your own neighborhood? Really in your neighborhood? Very good idea, very good idea. Absolutely very bad idea. Well, that's what happened. Many people said that's a very bad idea. This is the classical, not in my backyard, of course. But then what we did is we collected all those people, not all 350, but I guess about 70, 80 people in one room together with the government of Drenthe, and we presented the report. So this is what we showed on the screen, like, okay, this is what you said. These are your stories and your asks. And people really felt like, oof, this is it. This is difficult. How can we say this to the government? Yes, we want solar and wind energy. No, we do not want it in our own backyard. So people felt the tension, like, we have to come up with solutions for this, because we cannot do this. So then what happened in the session with this is that people started to think creatively, like, okay, how can we overcome this tension? What can we do? And then some new insights and some new solutions came up from the people, because they really felt responsible for their own stories and their own opinions. They felt responsible for what they shared, and they felt responsible for the tension here. And this really helped the government to come up with new ideas, which helped the energy transition, but was at the same time was okay for the citizens if it's not in their backyard. So for this, for me, this really showed that this participatory approach might help to not only collect their stories, but also to make sense of it, and then to see, okay, what can we do with it? What does it mean to us? Because people feel responsible for what they shared. Okay, I'll stop sharing my screen because we have 15 minutes left for this session, and I think there should be really some time also for questions, if there's some more questions.
In this last report, Is this publicly available? Can I see that?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it is. I'll check.
Because this is a very common problem which I have to deal every day.
I can imagine. Yeah. Maybe also it reminds me also all those interactive reports, they could be open. It depends on what you want. It could be open, it could be protected by password. Some of them are really contain some sensitive information, so we cannot publish it. So it depends on the purpose. In this case, I'll check if we can share it. I'll let you know. I think there's a question, Anna.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Very interesting. I was exactly kind of wondering about the question of the ownership and publicity. And for example, if you use the tool within organization, and of course it's quite confidential and things like that, how would that work? Where is all this information is stored? Who owns it? And can it be retrieved? Can you share a bit more there?
Yes. And at the same time, I must say that I cannot tell you about all the technicalities just because I don't know all the details of the technicalities. But the data it's not our data. So the data are from the organization who is running the Sprockler inquiry. It is, I don't know exactly the details, so I will not try to tell, but I know that the data are encrypted. They are on a certain, well, there's some security guarantees. So not everyone can enter the data. But for the details, I don't know. I can tell you a bit more about this, but we know that this Sprockler is being used in all different areas in the world, also sometimes on very sensitive issues. I know, for example, that Sprockler has also been used by human rights defenders in certain countries where there's quite a risk of doing inquiries like this. So there are certain measures and security guarantees taken. So all the data are protected. If you want to know more, I can tell you a bit more later. I can send you the information because this is very relevant. Because we've run quite some Sprockler projects in the last 10 years. We really learned how to further develop this and make sure that all the security guarantees are there. Yeah. So yes, it is protected. That's what I can tell you now, and I can tell you much more later. I can send you the information. Sure.
Okay. Yeah, I would like that. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Is there another?
Yeah. Sorry,
yeah.
I have a question. So basically, see, stories evolve, right? So as I was already, I discussed it already with respect to interventions. So we learn about stories and then we have interventions. So stories evolve, right? After the intervention, certain changes take place. Then again, we will get new stories and so my question is, using Sprockler, do we collect reports in separate timelines, or are you planning for a feature wherein I can see the progress of those stories? You know how they have evolved over a period of time.
Yeah, that's something we are thinking about. Yes. So sometimes what we do is when we have a Sprockler inquiry, we use it in a certain period, and then after maybe, I don't know, 6 months, we can do the same inquiry. Technically, I think we cannot. That's something we're really looking for, how to do this, because it would be great if you can see like how do the stories and the patterns evolve. I think technically we're not able to do it right now, but this is something we're working on because that's very interesting.
Yeah. So with respect to my experience, I can just share, like, for example, we design impact objectives with respect to certain interventions, right? Like, for example, I want to reduce the number of bugs in the code, just an example. So I introduce certain interventions, right? Like training program or whatever interventions or regular code reviews. I can have lots of interventions. So my basic parameters are fixed, right? I want to see whether the number of errors have reduced over a period of time. So at least with respect to if you have where those parameters are focused over a period of time, I can see how they are changed. Still, that will be very valuable in the tool thing.
Yeah.
I feel
yes.
that.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's also something I can share, because Sprockler is constantly evolving, and now it looks very different from when we started like 10 years ago, and we're always looking for organizations who want to cooperate on this with us. So the Sprockler, as I've shown you now, this is really the basic. This is how everyone can use it. But what we most of the times what we do, if there's an organization who wants to, well, maybe some new features or some new ways, then we're trying to co-develop this within the Sprockler software. So we really can see how we can adapt to the needs, how we can change the software. So if you or some others are really looking for how I can use Sprockler, but maybe if we do a little bit more of this, we can change it, and it will adapt, will really fit to what you're looking for. And we're really open to discuss it with you. Maybe we can collaborate on this. Are there any more questions now? Maybe in the
Maybe just quickly, where can we find, I guess, the details of pricing, or how would that work if we want to use the tool?
Yes, it's on the website sprockler.com.
Okay.
We're currently working on a new website, but still all the information is on the website. Also information about the pricing, about how it works. Basically, the idea of Sprockler is that you have to kind of buy a credit or a license, and you can just use it yourself. And if you're interested, if you're looking for some extra support, we can provide some extra support. You can always do a free trial. So you can just create an inquiry yourself, a limited skill, but it's just meant to just look around in the system, see how it works. You can just open an account on Sprockler, you can do a free trial, and you can just experiment a bit. Experiment with the questions, with designing a BIPOL, how does it work? Designing the visual report. On a limited skill, you can just experiment with it. And if you really want to use it, you can buy either a credit, so you can just do one inquiry, or you can subscribe to like a package, but there's different options in this.
Sounds good. Thank you. And maybe, yeah, sorry.
No, yes, please.
Now, a bit of a silly, curious question. Where does the name come from, and what does it mean?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, it was a few of our colleagues who came up with the question. I think, but I'm not sure, but I think it has to do with the Dutch word sprokkelen, which means something like, yeah, gathering, collecting. But now I'm thinking, I think it has to do with this, but I'm not sure. I know that the colleagues who came up with Sprockler, they've been really thinking a lot about the name. It should be something with stories or narrative, but I'll check, because now I'm curious as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a very kind of hard to pronounce name in a way, so I was wondering
It is,
where did it come from.
Sprockler, yeah, it's true. Yeah. Maybe also good to mention before I forget, we have some training, Sprockler training coming up. So if you're interested in maybe working a bit with Sprockler, there's the training dates. So we have an in-person training in March, which is here in this office in The Hague in the Netherlands. And we have an online training, which is 2 half-days. It's 2 afternoons in the beginning of April. There you will get all the ins and outs of the methodology, also about the philosophy and the principles. I just told you very briefly about this, but it's more in depth about what is it built on and how does it work. And you will get more time and more space to experiment yourself and work on it. So if you're interested, please go to the website and you can register for the training.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Let me check if there are no other questions. I think we can, and it's almost 4 o'clock, so that's perfect. Let's just close the session. I'm just curious, there's one more question I'd like to ask you. Just one takeaway. So what did you take from this session? What do you take home, take back to your work? Is there something you take with you. You can put it in the chat. You can tell it to the group. Just curious about your main takeaway from this very short session.
I guess a simple one is that there's more than SenseMaker, and you're bringing a few simpler ways that don't necessarily require a PhD, which is yay, good thing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's exactly true. I mean, it's really about making data and information accessible for everyone, and that's why it's visualized. Yes.
Can you please not record this and not send it to Dave? Thanks.
Yeah, you have a question or something to add?
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a really great inspiration, and you are sure I will definitely remember Sprockler, and I will use it definitely the next occasion. It will definitely come up sometime, and I will use it.
Thank you. Thanks. And also I see in the chat, yes, so much to learn on capturing and dealing with rich data. Yes, that's totally true. Thanks. Yeah. Sorry, someone was saying something.
I just wanted to thank Amsterdam Hub for organizing. It's really good. And thanks for making it feasible for our part of the world as well to attend. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, then I think that's it for now. Thank you very much for being here. I must say that for us, it was really, as was said before, it was quite improvising, but this is nice, of course. So I hope we gave a little bit of inspiration about Sprockler, a little bit of information, and a little bit of experimenting yourself. Really come back to us, please, if you want to know a bit more, if you want to try it out, if you want to see how it works in your context, if you want to discuss it with us. We're very happy to just have a chat with you to see whether it fits what we could do, because we believe this is a tool which can be used in different contexts, but it's very tailor-made. So we're always looking for ways to do this. So really feel free to contact us. And I hope at least it gave you some inspiration of how you can use the storytelling in this complex field. I'm just looking at Hannah, if you want to say something. Yeah, because it was all because of the Systems Innovations Hub that we came together. So thanks again also to Hannah.
Yeah, I'm just happy again to be able to bring Perspectivity, for them to share their experience, and for you all to ask your interesting questions. If you are interested in more events like this, then yeah, just keep an eye on the Systems Innovation LinkedIn page. We will always post the upcoming events there, and yeah, there will be more in this direction, but also in general, if you yourself have an experience, a tool, a method that you would like to share with other people, feel free to contact us, and we can organize an event similar to this for you to share something with others yourself. As well as if there's a certain topic you would like to explore, or a certain need that you have related to system thinking, yeah, we are always looking out for what is needed, what's on other events that we can bring people together to discuss these topics. So yeah, thank you all for joining us today, and looking forward to see you again in some other events.